Hello everyone. First of all, thank you Pyeongjun Kwan for your live performance. Thank you. Hello everyone. The 2021 PAMS began with a live performance titled Lyrics of Chip Android 2 Robot Nocturne. Well, now we have social distancing and there are safety regulations. Despite such difficulties, your performance was incredible. There were a lot of meanings. The live performance was simply great. Thank you for opening this year's PAMS with your performance. Well, let me introduce the work a little bit. Mr. Kwan is a media artist and also a pioneer who is using hardware that connects art and technology. He worked with sound, and his work spectrum covers film, visual arts, dance, and more to come. His spectrum is very wide and large. Well, I watched the performance live today, but I also saw a video clip before. It could be my personal thought. After watching your work, I felt a little sad. There was a series of sad emotions. I felt like I just witnessed dystopian world, but in the end, there was something human coming from those robots. So my first question is, why robots? As we can see from the title, they are not robots equipped with highly advanced technologies. They are cheap androids. Why did you choose to work with them? So my first question would be, why robots? And what's the motivation behind selecting robots? What do robots mean in your work? Well, it's been 3 years, over 3 years, since I've been working with robots. I've been working with sound for a long time. I'm not very used to motors. I'm not expert on motors, but I built these robots. I've been thinking about how we can communicate. How should we communicate with each other? This is one of the questions that I've been exploring for a long time. And another keyword is strangers. How do we treat strangers? Aren't we all strangers? Through many of my works, I've been exploring this idea. And I thought of extreme case of strangers. They are the characters in my work. They are not complete. These strangers are not complete. They are strange, not familiar. And some people might feel scared to behold them. When we meet such strangers, how do we meet them? How do people accept that meeting? I wanted to see what it causes, how it happens. How are we treating strangers? How much are we open towards strangers, strange beings? I think that's the type of experience I was going for in my work. Also, I am a stranger. I call myself a stranger. What about the robots? I have colleagues in my work experience, and the robots reflect, incorporate their characters. I remember people who I worked with when I was in music industry in this Hongdae region, Hongdae area, and the robots incorporate their characters. Well, they're kind of team members for me, members in my team. they also have characters that I have, characteristics that I have. So 3 years ago, I built the robots and they didn't change very much. They didn't evolve so much. They worked in the past. They are working. As of now, they have limited movement. But people can still sense emotions. I see how people sense emotions through my robots. Through machines, people experience feelings. And I think I'm trying to add that into my work. Right. So you have a message, and I think I was able to see and read your message in your work. Let's expand a little bit. Well, next week, I was told that at Seoul Performing Arts Festival in next week, you will present your work called We Will Have a Serious Night by Ghost Theater. Binaural headphone and AI will be used there, according to what I heard. You're using technologies there. Technology and arts are the keywords of our era. How do you converge technology and art? What does technology mean in your world of art? That's my second question. That is one of the trending issues. And it seems that many people want to work with technologies and art at the same time. Many people want to learn. Those two are distant areas. Sometimes there's confrontation even. There's even confrontation between the two, but I think there should be one starting point. Technologies and arts may not be different to begin with. Technologies and arts may have a process to meet each other again. Is it the calling of our time? Some people think it is our mission in these times. I think we should be able to criticize each other, and we should be able to know each other to criticize each other, right? Technologies are developing so much, and it is so rapid. It is in unprecedented manner. Politics, word, culture, and other fields are affected by technologies. So what do we do with technologies? Are we in maybe in different era than before? That's what I've been thinking. Right. A visual art critic, Chonghyun Kim, once mentioned that your work looks like a performance of robots or machines. But that's only what people see on the surface. At the fundamental level, your work is a theater for humanistic value. So this is about philosophy and connection between humanistic value and technology. Last but not least, we're going to discuss the world after the pandemic at this year's PAMS. We had conventions and tourings in the past. What about the future? How will international exchange look like in the future? Maybe there is no set answer at this point. It must be a difficult question, but what do you think about the new direction in the future in terms of this topic? Right, it's been difficult due to COVID-19. Even before the pandemic, I had this thinking. There is an important keyword that is affection for hometown. Well, what about it? We don't have hometowns. Contemporary people do not have hometown. Then how do we have affection for hometown? I think we may have to think more about it. This might open a new direction for exchange. About international exchange, well, we can take flights, we can have conversation, That is what we call international exchange. But what about now? It may need local roots. It may need a new meaning, even when we have international exchange. We can communicate with people who are far away from us. And I think this requires affection for your own hometown. That sounds very important. Locality or hyperlocality is one of the keywords. It is related to history and people in your local community. I think this is also connected. Despite busy schedules and limitations, you have shown amazing performance. Thank you again. Thank you for inviting me. Mr. Moon, the floor is yours. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to the Performing Arts Market in Seoul 2021. My name is Moon Young-ho, President of the Korea Arts Management Service. As of now, the world is struggling because of COVID-19, and so is the performing arts sector. Performances are being cancelled, and artists have lost the stages on which to perform. Despite these challenges, now is the time we must talk about the future of performing arts. The theme of this year's PAMS is Next Mobility and Circulation in a Post-Pandemic Era. Under this theme, we'd like to discuss the shifting dialogues in the international performing arts exchange. The changes due to COVID-19 are what we face together. Now is the time when we need communication and solidarity more than ever. To this end, we're joined by experts including Creative Director Kyu Choi to touch on various themes such as climate change, common values of art, ESG, and sustainable development. We shall pay more attention to these topics. 2021 PAMS will take place on its online platform PAMS On for 4 days from today until Thursday. With PAMS On, you can participate in the PAMS Salon, in which panels from home and abroad will discuss international issues. It is followed by Next Mobility, in which we will discuss the present and the future of international performing arts exchange. In PAMS Choice, 13 Korean performing artworks and artists will be introduced. You can also join various networking programs. Despite the challenges, the power of art will shine brighter when we gather and listen to each other. This year at PAMS, I hope all of you can come together once again in art. The 2021 Performing Arts Market in Seoul begins now. Please enjoy.
안녕하세요. Welcome to the opening forum under the theme of Next Mobility Circulation in a post-pandemic era, focusing on concept, digital, and green mobility and circulation. For the visually impaired persons, I would like to describe myself and where we are. We are at the studio in Hongdae, northeast part of Seoul. I am 176 centimeter tall and medium built and a long curly a little bit hair, and I'm wearing black frame glasses and then early 50 years old. My name is Q and a creative director of PAMS, Performing Art Market in Seoul 2021 and 2022. I would like to first of all present our four distinguished speakers. Right next to me is Jisun Park, a creative producer, producer group DOT. And right next to me again in my left side, Haewon Lee. She is producer and CEO of Kia Immersive Storytelling Studio. And over there, over the Pacific and also over the in Europe, and we have two our trustful friends and colleague, Chris Nelson, CEO, Artistic Director of London International Festival of Theatre, and Stefan Noel. He is based in Hong Kong as well as in Switzerland, Zurich, and executive producer of Materialize and a senior project manager at Lasso Dance Network, Switzerland. We all welcome all of you. Okay, now before we introduce full presentation, I would like to give a little bit snapshot why we chose this topic and a bit of context of what is our key questions. We can see the slide a little bit first. Okay. Starting with COVID-19 early last year, 2020, the pandemic created lots of loss and damages, not only in our life, but also in performing art industry. My colleague Jin Im and Jason Bach and I had a research during the pandemic time through online, which was an interview with our long-term respectable friends who are 12 artists, producer, festival director, venue directors, and international platform manager. So here we want to talk about what was our finding with the conversation with our colleagues. So when you see the slide, number one is, artists, producers, we were seized by fear and panic. And there are a lot of cancels, you can't do anything, but as we know always, artists has a great imagination. We all rethinking and then pivoting and shifting and finding new ways in creation. So first thing is meeting audience different ways. That was a sort of first findings, how we thinking something different way. Second finding is digitalization and art and technology related. The big change, how to engage with the technology. I mean, starting from simply live streaming and then creating new ways in transforming with using film techniques. And then even more high technology involved VR, AR, and a metaverse. New performing stage in digital space were developed steadily. So that was a third finding we figure out. And the last one is, it is true, we believe that pandemic is the sign of warning given by nature. How we artists, create, producer, and presenters, even audience, should respond to the climate changes and crisis. So we started to think about green and deep mobility. The last finding is we have to say locality, hyperlocality, and decentralization. So last finding is an important aspect because it's not because there is a limited or we cannot travel, but but they started to think about what is the local context, what is my neighborhood. That's a sort of more important aspect. So based on those findings, we started the Next Mobility Project 2021 and 2023, which is in association with the CAMS Connection, which is a research development project, and a PAMS as a platform, SPOP, Seoul Performing Art Festival. So this is 3 years long-term plan. So our direction is what would be new ways of kind of mobility. So focusing on concept touring. Second topic is how we respond climate change, climate crisis. What will be our practice, how we should be changed. And then last one is digital technology and digital mobility. When you see the, it's related to our forum, is we have three key questions. The key questions are like this, and number one is, how we think about international touring, mobility, and circulation in a different way. What would be alternative? What is a new ways? Second, important quick question in response to climate change crisis. What are the more greener ways international touring and mobility? What would be our activity? What would be creative practice should be different in respecting of climate changes? Last one is, how does evolving technology can embed it in our life? So what does technology means? How technology support, contributes digital mobility? That was our quick questions. So I just want to argue, we're not trying to do finding something new, something not exists. This forum, we just want to share about how we have to rethink. So the Anthony Sargent, based in UK, he had researched COVID-19 and a global cultural creative sector. He mentioned about, among the loss and damages, and what we learned, invaluable learnings. So through that, rather than we put, the broken piece together, how we built new foundation. So that's why we chose this topic. So we would like to explore. We would like to have a new imagination. We would like to talk about creative new cases. So I would like to invite 4 speakers first. Okay, first speakers, I would like to invite my colleague, Jisun Park. She is a creative producer, a researcher, and an art policy advisor over 20 years. She's been working without boundary genre, producing works, planning festivals, initiating international residence based on climate change, and the international network, which is the Asia Producers Platform. Welcome, Jisun. Now is your stage.
Thank you very much. That was a great introduction. My name is Jisun Park. I'm a creative producer, Jisun Park. Let me do a little bit of self-description, audio description. I'm in my late 40s. I have short hair. My hair is short and it's dark brown. I'm wearing beige top and I'm wearing jeans. Today, I'm here to talk about art and climate change. I think I've been invited because I was working on residency that touches on climate change. In the video clip, you can see the first page of artist's residency that I've been working on. The temperature is going up and up and up again. We can see how the temperature changed in the past century. The temperature rise was very large. I think you saw this page if you are interested in climate change. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came up with this report. 3 years ago, there was a special report. According to the report, 1.5-degree increase will be in 2052, but this year's report said it differently. The change will be faster. Actually, it will occur in 2040. It's a decade earlier, so we can see the discourse on climate change in the field. From last year, what happened after the pandemic, there were a lot of difficulties. One of the difficulties was crisis of mobility. Today, we're going to talk about international exchange and mobility. Mobility could be one of the basic foundations for performance because performance requires gathering, right? Last year, audience couldn't visit theater. Staff members and creators couldn't gather for a rehearsal. We had to meet online. There's crisis of mobility. And when we say mobility, if I go out of my home, out of my house, that means I have mobility, right? But we need to expand the scope. What about sustainability? Can art be sustainable? There were many discourses on this topic. Also, what about climate change? Why do we face a crisis? This is when we take a look at climate change. For the past year, I'm sure many people heard about the increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius increase. We also heard about carbon footprint, carbon neutrality, net zero, climate justice, and climate refugees. There's perspective from the study of climate change, but we can take other perspectives. The burden from climate change is unevenly shared by all people. This is when we also hear about climate refugees and climate justice. Then what direction do we need in the future? Let's take a look at deep mobility and green mobility. I think there were a lot of discourses on these topics. How can mobility become greener? How can we have deeper mobility? How can we have mobility in the context? What about veganism in daily life? And art and technology. We're meeting online now. We're using more technologies. This is not traditional. And this is also about methodologies for new mobility. But I think the key is this shift of perspectives. This is the core message. What about shift of perspectives? How do artists look at climate change? It's not from climatological point of view. What about human rights perspective? We've been asking how art can exist within this context. The role of art is related to this idea. We're exposing and resisting anthropocentrism and human exceptionalism. We're advocating for the socially disadvantaged and minorities such as refugees, the disabled, and women. We're also thinking about responsibility to future generations and future artists. That may be the role of art, the role of contemporary art. I've been looking into the topic of arts and climate change and I found many things. I've been asking what art can do. I've been thinking about the power of art. You can see that it's from 2009. It's been a while. And it's from Bill McKibben. Artists, in a sense, are the antibodies of the cultural bloodstream. They sense trouble early and rally to isolate and expose and defeat it, to bring to bear the human power for love and beauty and meaning against the worst results of carelessness and greed and stupidity. So when art, both of great worth and in great quantities, begins to cluster around an issue, it means that civilization has identified it finally as a threat. Artists and scientists perform this function most reliably. This is from Bill McKibben. Artists are the entire bodies of the cultural bloodstream. This was great. This meant a lot to me. I was able to resonate with what he said. This is another reference I found. It's from a book that I read this year. This book was written by Hyoje Cho in Korea. The core of the sentiment about climate change is loss. And artists deal with this loss. There's language within artistic community. We've been thinking about artists and producers. There are a lot of artists. What about performing arts? How can we have more voice? I think we need more activities. We call the current times the era of transition. I believe everyone will agree. So we need to shift the perspectives. And this is not just about transition of thought. It's about transition of system, the entire system that we have. In performing arts sector, it can mean building, production, technology, and step engagement. It can also involve communication, PR, marketing, tour, mobility, audience, catering, environmental policy, and partnership. We need transition in so many ways. We are joined by Chris from London. This is about what happens in London. Many institutions, theaters, and organizations are working in this field. They are working hard to have a carbon neutral theater and carbon neutral system. In Korea, we have heard about eco-fringe. This is also about how artists should respond to climate change. This is about what I've been working on. This is the residency that I participated in. It began last year. The theme is climate change. It was a combination of online and offline residency programs. Participating artists conduct individual research and individual work, but they also collaborate. They share information, knowledge, and inspiration with each other. It has local and global perspectives on climate change as well. As you know, climate change is about everyone. It's a global issue. How can we make connection and how can we expand? This is what we have been thinking about. There are pictures in the slide. It's from our work. 6 artists participated last year and there are 7 artists this year. They are working in various fields like livestock industry. Some are exploring wild boar, wild forests, and so on. So some are working on animals and lives. We've been thinking about this. What about artists and activists? Artists are not activists. Then what do we do? What do we do as artists? In the contemporary world, how do we approach this idea? Maybe artists can do what activists do. We have our own language. And then, about artistic methodology. This is about communicating with audience. And we're thinking the most about global issue, global connection. How can we connect globally? It's about locality, but it's also about sharing what happens in local community. And this requires connection. This also requires expansion and bringing it to social discourse. We will keep thinking about these topics. We will start to identify green policy, and we can have green riders. Maybe we can have hybrid format combining online and offline formats. This will happen even after the pandemic. We have artists from other countries. How can we communicate with them online? Most importantly, arts do not stand alone. There are science, technology, sociology, philosophy, and so on. There's more to come. And we've been thinking about this approach. Last but not least, I think arts and climate change are about individual and groups as well. This is also about shift of practices, and this is also about transition of the arts ecosystem. Change in Korea can be also met with change on the global stage. Then we can fulfill our responsibility for the next generation and next generation artists. I've been speaking quite fast, and let me wrap up my
네,
presentation with that.
고맙습니다. Thank you very much, Jason. There are a lot of facts on climate crisis, and also she pointed about how we have to act, such as making green rider, green policy, and also different way of mobility. But the one thing I just stuck to me is an important question she mentioning about the shift of perspective. It's not only the issue how we green way making, but also what philosophy, what is policy, what perspective we have to think about green and the climate issues. So maybe later when we have a time to discuss, we can discuss further. Okay, thank you very much, Jason. Next speaker, I would like to present Chris Nelson. Chris Nelson, now he's in London. Thank you very much, Chris. It's early in the morning. And Artistic Director and CEO Lyft. He's talking about concept touring. They commissioning program for artists to develop, the concept-based international mobility. So Chris is a CEO and artist director, and also he worked in a Dublin Fringe Festival in Ireland, largest multidisciplinary art festival. But actually, as far as I know, he's from Canada. Lyft celebrate 40 years anniversary. Wow, congratulations. So let me introduce Chris Nelson, our friends in London. Chris?
Thank you, Q, and thank you to everyone in the team at PAMS for hosting this wonderful keynote and for inviting me today. I'm Chris Nelson. I am a white 40-year-old man with mustache and a green shirt. Behind me are some plants and a bowl on a bookshelf. I will speak today about concept touring. And give me a moment, please. After all of this time of Zooming, I'm still not an expert at sharing my screen. So first, I want to tell you a bit about Lyft to give you a context for why we started to work on concept touring. So Lyft is an international festival. As Q said, we celebrated our 40th year this year. We're a biennial. Our presentations happen all across the city in theaters and in unusual and iconic venues. This is a slide of a production by East London Dance and Hofesh Schechter featuring 100 dancers at the Tower of London called Eastwall from our 2018 festival. In 2018, which was when we had our last edition, the festival had 20 shows, 40,000 people came, and there were 10 commissions. It featured 24 theater artists from 7 different countries and lots of programs by young people. 22 young artists, in fact. 40 Londoners were involved in the festival, and we had many low-price tickets. So the shape of our festival is contemporary. Our interest is in international theater. Our interest is definitely in presenting really iconic, adventurous, and leading international artists, but often also by showcasing Londoners in the heart of the works themselves. So from the very beginning of Lyft, our international projects, when they've come to London, have happened with local efforts, local involvement, local volunteers, and have always had an aspect of London within an international presentation. And that's an important part, I think, of our DNA for this concept touring project. During the pandemic, while we were in that first wave of festivals that launched and then canceled very quickly, our festival was meant to be in June 2022. And because we rely so heavily on co-presentation, and many of the projects that were coming to us were part of, coming to us from Brussels and then moving on to Hanover, we were part of a kind of linked network. It just meant that travel was impossible, and we unfortunately had to cancel. We kept going with our commissions. We commissioned this artist, Sonia Hughes, who is based in East Yorkshire. She made a piece called I Am from Reykjavik, which is about race and belonging in the public space. She constructs a structure in the middle of a public square and invites audiences to talk to her about race and belonging. We presented this year as part of a Lift Loves London season, which was a strategy to present a season of work rather than a festival, in order to celebrate our 40th anniversary and stand behind artists like Sonia, who we had commissioned. In November of 2020, we did remote filming, and we commissioned a set of films from Nairobi's The Nest Collective, where they worked with Black activists who were at the vanguard of migration, sex and sexuality, gender issues, eco-activism, and all kinds of different types of activism. The Nest were based in their film studios in Nairobi. We rented a studio in Peckham in Southeast London. We interviewed local activists and worked with a cinematographer who became essentially the lens or the director, the on-site director for the Nest's vision. And that was a really powerful project for us to do, not only in terms of the content, but also motivationally, as we did it in one of the strictest parts of the lockdown. Our uplifters are a group of young people that Lift has been working with for the last 5 years. And during the pandemic, normally in the lead up to a festival, they will make a show and interpret an international artist's vision. Without a festival, that group really quickly turned into a kind of, we spent time with the young people, we offered them mentorship and coaching, and it essentially became a social club for them, and a way of sticking together during a time when everything was shut down here in the UK. We launched concept touring, and you might see there's a kind of a GIF of the text concept touring that rolls and rolls and rolls in March of 2021. And what it is it's a set of commissions for international artists. The idea is there were commissions to international artists for international collaborations with little to no travel. We gave the artists small fees of £2,500 and over 3 months of mentorship, both in group and one-on-one. Concept touring is a term I came up with that marks a trend that we've all known in the performing arts, international performing arts, for a long time, and certainly we've known it in Lift, which is everything from a performance piece that requires a local choir that comes from somewhere else but requires a local choir to perform in the piece, to a piece that maybe has a lead actor but also needs a local actor to perform as a kind of extra. So projects like that, projects where the artist doesn't need to travel, just the technician can travel, or the technical director, and it can be handed off literally to a festival or a theater to deliver. All kinds of trends within the international performing arts scene, we grouped together under this term of concept touring, thinking it could be a way forward that could group together remote work, licensing, digital work, hybrid work, ways of sharing projects where less people and less goods travel. And really, the kind of 4 ways we identified that being were that there was a transfer. Either there was a transfer from an artist to another artist who would deliver their project. There was a transfer from an artist in one place to a group of participants. Perhaps there was a transfer from an artist directly to an audience, or an artist to site. And some examples I might give of that are, there's a storytelling project by one artist, where they create a set of stories, and then that set of stories gets transferred to another artist locally who interprets that set of stories and responds. Another project with participants, a duo, a pair of artists create a project that is meant to be delivered by and experienced by groups of 12-year-old girls all around the world. And the concept is a set of instructions for them to construct something and then interrelate with each other all at the same time. There's artist to audience. There's a project, and I'm trying not to give too much of it away because some of these artists haven't premiered their works yet. So I'm being a bit deliberately unspecific, or not giving you the full picture of what the projects are, to protect their intellectual property. But artist to audience, there's a smartphone. For an example, we have a smartphone game that audiences play. And it goes directly to them with very little interplay between the artist and the audience once the project is launched. And then artist to site, similarly, a set of instructions devised by an artist for experiencing an iconic site within any city, a museum, say, or an airport, a kind of building or site that is iconic anywhere, but very specific to each place. We've done phase one. And in phase one, as I said, we got these ideas, these projects from the idea phase to the next step, which might be presenting them to presenters or presenting them to funders. Next, we will test out and take 2 of these projects into production in our 2022 festival. And that means this is where we will start to test and tease out practices, methodology, principles for how these kinds of things can get made. Throughout our experience, we were talking about ethics and knowledge sharing. So LIFT's goals and our interest in this project was, one, to support artists to collaborate internationally at the time in the pandemic when travel still was really impossible all around the world, and when artists had experienced a year of being very, very local. 2, to build new relationships among artists and between artists and LIFT and the mentors. 3, to seed some projects and start developing a set of practices and knowledge. And eventually, as we take the projects to production, our next goal is to do knowledge sharing so that we will be able to share our practices and our learnings so that other people can pick up on the how and the what we're doing in very, very specific cases. So I think each project brings its own set of producing problems and puzzles. It brings its own challenges to presenters and to artists. And that's on the pragmatic and practical side. On the more philosophical side, perhaps, there's also questions that we're hoping to answer, or tensions to resolve or live in fact, which would be about ethics of transfer, things between the global South and global North, and author rights. I'm getting the clock, so I will stop. But for us, it's exciting that we're embarking on this because it feels like we're adding something interesting and important to the international scene. It's been dynamic and exciting and challenging for the artists and for us as presenters, and we're really keen to take these projects to the next level. So that is us, LIFT, and I will turn it over back to you, Q. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much.
I think the Lift Festival is a good example. While in the pandemic time, every festival canceled, but how festival shift, rethink, and pivot to program to meet artists, to meet audience in a different way. So that's a wonderful way of your launching. The concept touring. So also we are very much looking for your stage to knowledge sharing. It will be very important how we share what was the creative practice, methodology, and maybe too early to share that. Maybe in a discussion time, I might ask one specific question if you can share. Okay, thank you, Chris, very much. Next speaker, I would like to present Renee Haewon Lee. She is a producer, CEO, Kiai Immersive Storytelling Studio in Seoul. When people hear about Kiai, it sounds like a very foreign language, but is a Korean. Haewon is a multidisciplinary producer, educator, CEO, and the co-founder of Kiai Immersive Storytelling Studio based in South Korea. Okay, Haewon, now is your stage.
Hello, everyone. I'm Renee Haewon Lee, and I'm an immersive producer and CEO of Kioi Immersive Storytelling Studio. Thank you for inviting me to this great event, and I'm very honored to be here. Today, I'm going to talk about digital mobility in the performing arts and theater, and I would like to share with you my experience and insights as not only as a producer, but also a viewer. As we already know, we are not going back to normal, which means we are facing new challenges and we are heading towards a new normal for every sector. With COVID-19 and the closing of venues across the country, many performing arts organizations quickly pivoted to create digital content with live streaming or on-demand offerings. They experienced a steep learning curve. This new type of learning has been the catalyst for widespread embrace of a technological revolution. As a result, we are witnessing rapid disruptive innovations. First of all, let's look at the trends and takeaways seen through curious cases into virtual mobility. As I participated as a producer and experienced it, I found cases of different genre, and I also look at the value chain perspective, such as production, distribution, and consumption. I can categorize them in the following ways. We are already living in an era where it is common to see art activities wearing devices or to see avatars performing on TV or game. When it comes to surviving in the transforming era, you are bound to ask essential questions again. Korea National Contemporary Dance Company hosted the workshop program, which is designed to redefine, rethink the future of dance through the use of technology. I participated in this program as a mentor with Ji-sun at this process-driven workshop where dancers, choreographers, designers, and engineers all took part. It was a great opportunity for artists to talk to engineers and better understand the language of technology. By helping people get better acquainted with the technology, we help them get inspired and have fun along the way. What we also realized was that artists thought about the relationship between space and virtual reality. We all experienced a social VR platform called VR Chat. We wondered about prisons. We marveled at how senses both inside and outside of the body could be connected in the virtual world, with sensory movement at the heart of digital and virtual mobility. There are lots of experiments. Let's see another experiment Zoom interactive play called My Food Diary. In Korea, there were lots of attempts to foster their artistic activities in digital medium. Baba Circus in Korea tried online interactive play via Zoom. Originally, it was offline site-specific performance. Rather than defining it as an extension of offline performances, they defined it as a whole new genre. By using current digital technologies, artists can tell a story across multiple platforms and formats. And they are transforming venues and live performances into experiences that are much more immersive, engaging, and resonant with the times. Let's take a look at the music cases that I participated in. The sound map project in multispace of Unijo, based on place and space experiments with the potential to expand the performance format. Her artistic goal was not to recreate the physical experience in digital medium to best of her ability. What she did instead was to reimagine the experience in a way that reveries the unique characteristic of digital medium. In effect, she put interactivity at the center of her project. Audience can take a poetic virtual journey wandering around diverse space, sounds, films, and rhythms through the multi-layered spaces, including VR, and encountered choices that traveling the seek answers. Her project shows that the most consistent excitement from creators and producers is the digital medium's potential to extend accessibility on multiple fronts. Changes in pipeline in digital projects are inevitable. They are forced to merge the creative pipelines of theater, and these attempts fundamentally transform value chains. Let's see another case. Airy in Netherlands was a 15-minute mixed reality experience performance by Esther Che. They accepted the fact that the technology has a limitation. In the spatial platform, there is no avatar lag, and the sound quality was not good enough, but they said that these kinds of efforts to apply them and discovery and apply new spaces can foster the artist vision. This project has overcome the limitation in global mobility by leveraging digital technology. This was necessary because the director and actor were both located in the United States. They did script reading and initial practice via Zoom. After that, they proceeded with the rehearsals by accessing the virtual space. Only a few people were invited to the spatial digital theater were free to move their point of view, but the majority of people watched the edited screen on YouTube. But the audience loved the liveness, and they loved the fact that there is no restriction on the place. It also suggests online performance may act as a gateway to offline performance. Let's move on to the Korea traditional music performance team cases that I participated in. Plus tried the Minecraft games to let people experience traditional culture in virtual spaces. Originally, it was a program that combined performance and workshop at the art center. Instead of simply canceling the performance, they chose an innovation method to make more chances to enjoy Korean traditional music performances. First of all, we all created the virtual concert hall in Minecraft, modeled after the actual concert hall. And also we created the location where anyone could undertake a time of adventure inside there. And also we created a fantastic space set mirroring the era in which traditional performances actually began. They also got inspired and created the synergy in working with game developers. The most thing for all was to meet potential audiences who originally mostly played instead in game world. So to find a new audience to make a meaningful experience, we headed to the game, the place where they spend the most of time. In order to make this a new type of art experience, they tried to maintain high quality across music, storytelling, and game elements and experience scenarios too. And all of the cases so far has some limitations. It was not good enough to feel actors' presence, and sometimes there was no liveness. It was also difficult to feel as a community experience occupying the same space. They tried to strengthen accessibility through various platforms. The environment enjoyed at home had many obstacles. Let's look at the Excel cases of overcoming physical distance and trying liveness together. All of works were shown here have recently become to be a topic abroad until the name of VR immersive theater. It is familiar to people who work in the same field as me, but I think it will be rather unfamiliar to the people in theater. As you can see on the screen, people from all over the world connect their home and participate in the performance live. This is not a simple viewing, but an immersive play that is given a role. It is more immersive than anything else because it blocks the view and uses the body and makes a voice. The reality that these works are being introduced through the film festival in that VL has been attempted to be used artistically in the film sector. There is a still limit to us being subordinate to merchants, but it is nevertheless becoming a genre its own. As you can see here, you can be a team member of ball, and you can try a Tempest play in an animated three-dimensional environment. What's important is that you can feel telepresence because several people participate at the same time. In other words, you will not be isolated in viewing and feel as if you are together and feel the sense of being there. It is important point in the changed digital environment that the audiences actively participate in and plays the role like an immersive place. The movement to the virtual stage means that the proscenium stage disappears and that the three-dimensional environments must be converted to three-dimensional narratives. The fourth wall was broken and we were more connected. Now, in the era of the digital transformation, the discussion of components versus substitutes is meaningless. Today, I shared the several cases of digital mobility under the theme of Next Mobility. Looking at the impact of the digital mobility, I learned there are key takeaways such as needs for technology experiments and explorations, and movement of multi-platform digital states, and changes in genre, hybridization, and value chain, and evolution into a three-dimensional virtual environment and narrative. There is no doubt that artists are interested in the story of living together in this era. I think it is a time to think about where your artistic vision is headed. As a technology is lowering barriers to enter for new creators, and audiences want to be more connected with you. That's why I think the new mobility will continue to evolve. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Hwan. I think we really appreciated you gave us a good example or a creative practice of what's happening in Korea across the different genre in dance and theater and traditional art form. Also the international, artworks. It's sort of, you mentioned about challenges about how we created more liveness, presence, and emotions. So this is a sort of good question when we work with the technology. So I think maybe we can discuss further about these the challenges when we work with digital technology. Also, you mentioning about think about the different way of a value chain. So it will be a good idea we can talk. Okay, thank you, Hwan. Next, I would like to, Stefan, thanks for waiting for a long time. I would like to present Stefan. He is representing RESO Dance Network in Switzerland, executive producer Materialize. He will share, new idea and a potential project, a very transnational online platform called OpenScape. Okay, Stefan, welcome.
Thank you for inviting us here. 안녕하세요. I'm Stefan. I'm a tall white male with mostly dark hair and beard, but turning slowly gray. I speak today not on behalf of my company Materialize, but of RESO, the Swiss Dance Network. Maybe a quick note about RESO because it's interesting to see how it starts. RESO is the association of all 90 dance presenters of Switzerland, venues or festivals, who are paying a symbolic membership. And it was funded in 2006. and now is financed by Helvetia and the all 26 cantons of Switzerland on a 4-year program. The thinking that drove this project OpenScape I'm going to talk about is that the COVID pandemic has raised multiple questions globally, and that in our profession, perhaps none stronger than the question of mobility and the restriction that paralyzed it. Mobility is not only a question of choice, however, for many artists and practitioners, it's also a question of necessity, and the difference is not always clear, or at least the question is not always absolute. How does it inform touring? How does it inform viewing performances? And in our case, how does it impact meeting our peers? Because one thing we learn from the current travel restriction is the value of in-person meeting. Maybe its value because it's of rarity made felt stronger. But of course, we took it until now for granted. And now it's clearer than ever for the necessity of meeting people, and also I would say meeting peers randomly. You know, if you go to PAMS, I would meet people who would introduce me to other people, or I would hear a conversation and join. And it's, we need to find other ways to stimulate this kind of random encounters, maybe not to replace all those very important platforms, but at least to supplement them. So if we look at the direct consequence of this restriction in traveling, is that we adopted and adapted to digital teleconference tools like we are doing today. And maybe rather than discuss about what the lack of mobility impedes, we try to think about what digital solutions allow nowadays. And one thing is clear is that it brings some form of equity because it's more inclusive access. It's geographic access, of course, also financial because we don't need to travel. Also for people with physical disabilities and passport or diplomatic issues, and also all the time it takes to go from a point to another. And another very important element that these digital tools allow is the transnationalism. That is, working in a digital environment removes most of the borders, at least the geographical borders, sometimes not the economical environment borders, because some countries don't have so good internet, but at least it's a step forward. And so we try to keep this notion in mind at Réseau, and we have been developing an online platform thinking how we can do it rationally and not do it nationally, simply. The platform itself must be developed by practitioners of all sides. So we think it's important that both artists and presenters take part to it, so that there's a dialectic exchange between the two, and also that the time spent there can be useful to all. So presenters can discover new artists, and artists can connect to new presenters, not to mention between artists. And when I speak about artists, for us it's very clear, we do not want to use this platform as a showcasing platform of artworks. So this is not the fact that René has been pushing forward, but we would like to feature artists and to feature conversation and to bring about topics that matter, and especially emerging topics that we are not aware in a global way. Not showing artworks, but featuring artists still means that we should pay the artist, and we are looking into ways of doing that. We have found no way for some, but it has to be a constant process. The form is to have regular events. Some would be curated by the presenters, and we invite artists to, I don't know what I have on my face, would invite artists to join in a panel, help them moderate. I'm sorry, I'm a bit disturbed by help them moderate and build the event. And the other half of the events should come from the artists themselves. That means that some topics we don't know about, the artists know better. They can also exchange and push agendas that are not that of the presenters and makes those agendas aware to us. Then there's going to be a permanent platform, probably on a Discord type engine, where people can meet 24/7. This is to have discussions that go beyond the one meeting or the one weekend or the one few days event, and also to work on different time zones to open, I'm sorry, to work in different languages and maybe have self-initiated conversation happen. We are planning to launch OpenScape by the end of the year with a soft launch of both the permanent platform and an event. And we want to allow it to grow organically. We are aware that we not get it right the first time and that we want to be flexible enough that it evolves according to the needs. Oh, sorry. So I don't want to speak much longer. Maybe it's better if we have some time to exchange with my colleagues and audience. So 감사합니다. Have a nice continuation of the meeting and a great PAMS.
고맙습니다.
Thank you very
your
much.
Korean pronunciation sometimes is better than me. 감사합니다. Thanks, Stefan. You know, there is always silver linings when you had such a difficult time, but also you shared about what we learned from the pandemic, which give us a rethinking. So you mentioned about that. We're very looking forward to your new project, OpenScape. Maybe we can discuss further. You know, always it's having difficulties when we have an online platform. So how can we different online and offline? I mean the platform, and also such a difficulty is transnational because it's nation-oriented promotion. I mean, international networks, how we can work and internationally in terms of transnationalism. That will be really important question. Okay, thank you very much for all of you. I mean, a wonderful presentation and sharing your thoughts and your experience and a good practice. Now we are going to have a discussion. So maybe I found some following questions. And also, each of you have a question each other. I mean, please, join us. And those audience and people who are joining us in YouTube and Facebook, please leave your questions. If you have anything to ask any speakers here, we will follow you later in 10 minutes Q&A session. Thank you. Be joining us. Okay, my question first go to Jason because she was the first speaker. You mentioned about, a shift of perspective. You know, there are many different ways people think about climate change in art practice. So instead of climate change merely using marketing tool as a creation material, so if we wanted to be the base of creation, production, and international mobility, how do we change our perspective and attitude? It's a difficult question, is what has to be done?
Well, that is a challenging question to answer. So I was in residency programs with artists, and there were many experts who delivered lectures. We had scientists, we had artists, we had ecologists. So we were able to listen to lectures in different fields. When we talk with scientists, we feel powerless. The world is already becoming dystopian world. What can we do? I think that's what we start to think. And yes, climate change is a keyword. It's very important. So we think we must do something. We think there must be an action. Many companies use it as marketing tools. Many artists think they should talk about climate change, and theaters think theaters should do something about climate change in 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. We think it's a topic that we should address. We believe it is a topic that we should deal with. But is it just that? Is it an issue that we deal with a short time period? When we study and have conversations with artists, we realize that it is intricate, it is complicated. As an artist, as a producer, as a citizen, as a global citizen, what must we do? This is a very complicated issue. What kind of perspective should we take? There is perspective in terms of climate change, in terms of human rights, and in terms of ecosystem, ecology as well. I think what we need is having multiple perspectives and multiple approaches. Only then we can realize how it is linked to our lives. So what we need is diverse perspectives. And more personally, what kind of responsibility do we have in terms of climate change? This is also what we need to think about. We are artists, we are producers. Then in contemporary world, how do we communicate about climate change? I think that's what we need to think about. Also, we need to consider next generation artists and next generation audience. We have responsibility for them. So I think it's not just about the next few years. It's more than that. That's what I've been thinking.
고맙습니다.
Thank you for your
think,
answer.
What Jinsun mentioned remind me, we have to question to ourselves, first. And it's not only the act from individual or artist company or the policy, we have to work together. So yes, I totally agree about shape the perspective. The second question I have, what would be barriers and challenges in eco-friendly producing or production? Green and deep mobility, and also artist creative practice. Actually, for example, I really want to go to touring with my production. But I ethically think about, am I going? Or what is a kind of barriers there is already. And also, in Europe, they can travel by train. But like my colleague in Indonesia, they cannot travel by here to present their work. So what would be actually barrier challenges I would like to question to you, yeah?
Question to me, right? Okay. I think other people can answer that question as well, but let me give my answer in 3 ways. First, how do we have eco-friendly production? It might be a joke, but I'm actually serious about it. We think a lot about climate change and we watch documentaries. Maybe we should stop watching documentaries. Because when we watch documentaries, we cannot eat anything. We cannot do anything in our lives. After watching documentaries, we cannot do anything. There are a lot of points of contact between art and climate change. So when we create art, how do we strike the balance? Methodologies in art matter, as I mentioned earlier. We have aesthetic value. That's also important. I think it is important to understand what to give up. What kind of limitations do we have? What kind of imagination can we still maintain? So there's aesthetics and there's ethics. When there's conflict between the two, we need to strike the balance. That requires our own principles. So we need our own policies for environment, maybe. Second, you mentioned Indonesia, but what about Korea? We're basically island. We cannot go to North Korea. What if we have no-flight policy? We cannot all have no-flight policy. Mobility is very important for every single artist. There's digital mobility, but there's also physical mobility. One artist can create so much value when there's mobility. We also need to address this issue. Lastly, well, I'm not sure about Europe, but in Korea, performance matters. We value performance. And that performance must be something visible. It should be tangible. And sometimes performance in short time period matters. We receive support based on performance level. The number of tours can be important in this context. It's not about having 10 flights. One single case of mobility can have so much value, and what kind of value can it have, can it generate? So I think we need to revisit value of mobility. Change can come from the site, and change can also come from public institutions that support art community.
Yeah. The
Okay.
value, I mean,
Right.
of artistic, also, you have to really think about, do you really want to do that? And when you have international physically touring, thank you, Jason. I think I got a little bit pressure. I mean, that they don't have, say that we don't have enough time. So let's go to the next question to the Chris. Chris, I mean, it's too early to you share about and good practice in terms of methodology and a principle of your commissioning touring, the concept touring work. Did you, I mean, a bit of, can you share about what is one or two things? It's hard to generalize, I mean, because the artistic work is one by one is all different and various, but any good important findings so far, methodology, principles, and ethics, do you have anything?
Yes, thank you, Q. I think it picks up a bit from what Jason was saying as well about our will and the decisions we make. Because I think one of the things we know already about any of the models of concept touring that we're looking at is it doesn't make it easier. It still requires an enormous, in fact, it might require more effort from the artists and the producers to host the work, create a relationship for another group or artist or entity locally to receive the work and then present it. It's probably easier to just put people on a plane. But the will to try new ways of international collaboration, to cut down on the impact, ecological impact of travel and the restrictions we might face from this pandemic and future ones, means it requires us as presenters to have different skills. We'll probably work just as hard. And the people on our teams may work more closely with the artists, both locally and internationally. So it might become less anonymous. It might become a deeper partnership. It might mean that we will focus the energy within the team differently and the effort within the team differently. But just as we found with digital performance, it's not less expensive and it doesn't take less time. It takes the same amount of time, if not more, probably. And the cost is relatively the same. So while you might not be putting 20 people in a choir on the plane to sing, you still have to teach them locally the songs. And we know this. I think many of us as producers and presenters would know this already. This kind of finishes the conclusion that truly is the way forward. So that's one very important thing. And then I think the other important thing for us is that as we develop this new way of working, or as we kind of consecrate this way of working within Lyft, we still will be presenting international artists and presenting them physically, putting them on planes, going through the visa process and all of these kinds of things physically in London, because that's very important for our audiences and it's very important for what we intend to do, especially with artists who, as you point out, don't have access to quick and easy, cheap train travel, and artists from the global south who can't rely on a network of many, many, many very well-resourced theaters dotted all across Europe. So I think that the key takeaways would be, as practitioners, as presenters, sorry, the translation's just coming. I'm just going to turn it off. As practitioners, artists, arts administrators, we will do the same amount of effort. We just might do it differently.
Okay. Maybe, thank you very much. One more question before I go to the Hewan. In June, we had in your slide, you mentioned about ethics in concept touring. So in June, we had case study based on Jerome Bell International Co-Production. So there are a lot of discussion ongoing. So we really respect appreciated acknowledge his work. Also the main point is about ethics talking. So I wrote the article, the title was Putting Concept into Action, the Devils is in the Details. So big question is, ethically, the protocol and dance score base, can Jerome Bell's philosophy can be transferred into the locally and with the staff? So also in your slide, you mentioned about ethics. So what is your point is, I know is that the cultural differences, art is the way of differences, how we have to think about ethics in our international co-productions.
I think you've picked up on the most emblematic artist of this kind of movement, Jerome Bell, internationally renowned, respected, a long career, makes beautiful work, and has been an advocate of this type of touring for a long time. And in the polemic of it all, there's a beautiful, really important, well, not beautiful, but very important and frictive, full of friction dialogue between him and an artist from Mexico called from the company Legertías al Sol, Teatro Legertías del Sol, which is really vital, which talks about the access and right to mobility. I think in any scenario, some of the ethics that you might have to measure and consider would be the seniority or stature of the artist. What does it mean when an artist from, certainly in the UK, what does it mean if a UK artist is making a concept that's going to a former colony of the UK and being delivered by artists there? There's loads of ethical questions, political questions involved around colonization, around authorship, around expertise. I think the conversation you must have with the artists are around, okay, you're delivering this master work by a masterful artist, but you must also acknowledge the mastery of the artist and the skill of the artist locally. So it opens up a conversation around author rights, around billing. Is it presented by Jerome Bell with the local artist, or by Jerome Bell and the local artist? All those little tiny bits of minutia that really become quite important. Because for the work, the artwork will change and shift as it moves different locations. That's one of the things we all know and love about touring. And I guess it points out new areas of conversations that we must have, so that we're looking at the ethics as a live thing, as a thing that's transparent and communicated, and not that we understand and unpick some of those cultural assumptions.
Thank you. It is very much true. Before we didn't think about, or less valued about those ethics. So when we think about different way of concept touring, is we have to think of what is new norm. We have to think. Thank you for sharing for your thought. Okay, thank you. And next question, I go to Hewan. Hewan showed a lot of wonderful technology-based practices. So, but advanced and evolving technology does not only create something new work, and we have to think about how we engage audience. We have to think about different way of circulation. So, in order, you mentioning about the value chain. So, in order to create a kind of whole value chain in creation with the technology, what are challenges and the barriers? What do we have to think? How we work together?
네, 좋은 질문 감사합니다.
Thank you for the great question. As Chris mentioned before, when we are trying out new technology at the initial stage, it takes up lots of money. So removing the equipment and devices on the stage doesn't mean that we use less money. Actually, by trying out new technologies, we use more money, and it's one of the challenges. And when we are trying out new technology, what we are asked by the artists and institutions when we ask them is that, are you ready to meet the new types of audience, and does it hold significance that you try out new forms of performance by using the digital technology? So of course, this new change of using technology and digital space is meaningful, but just following what others do, just because what many others are doing, and that's because if that's the reason why you are trying out this technology, that's one thing that you need to think about. And the one challenge may be how to interact with the audience. And small size artistic institutions, they don't have the tech experts or the engineers. So there should be some experts and people who are involved with technology, and there should be some in the middleman to connect the artists and technology. And this is one of the challenges that the small size institutions are lacking. And what I got to think when I have conversation with the artists is that they have less opportunity to be exposed to new technology. So we shouldn't just think about technology as something expensive and difficult. And technology developers are putting in many efforts to develop it, and they're also focusing on developing technology that has low cost, but such information is not delivered to many artists so far. So the artist should be able to experiment more and try out many things and discover what suits yourself. And we should hold lots of programs to make those artists be aware of that. And some people might think that I'm just a person doing traditional art, so I don't need the transition into digital technology. And we shouldn't criticize their thoughts, but we should think about the new types of audience and the future audience, whether we are going to meet the new types of audience, and if we feel the need or urgency to take in the new types of digital space and technology, we need to try out the new things. And like Jisung mentioned, Korea is very focused on making the performance, the outcome, the result is very important. So the process is not that valued, and people fear making failures. But still, when we are working on the art, when we want to have some collaboration with global artists, and when we want to try out something experimental, we also need to fail many times in the process and think about it in a new way.
Thank you very much. I think I have to funding bodies and also, the festival and also the venues, presenters, maybe think about what Haewon said, what we need, how we provide it to the artist. Okay, so maybe before I go to Stefan, I have one more question. Regarding the Jisung's topic is a greener way of using technology. So, when we use high technology, we consume a lot of energy as well. I mean, so that does not mean an eco-friendly way of working. So, might be difficulties. How can we engage with technology more greener way?
This question is too challenging. It's really difficult to answer this one. Actually, green technology takes more money, it's more expensive, so that's why it is more challenging. And one thing to think about is that we need to create more contents to bring about the change in the perspective on the environment. Of course, I'm involved with the virtual reality and virtual space, but we need to make people realize in what crisis the art is in right now. And we can utilize virtual reality or virtual space, and we can use some device that consumes less electricity, and we can consider the environment perspective when we are
Thank you.
devising
Maybe
this
it was a
work.
different
And
question. We might need to have a hackathon. I mean, creative way using technology. Okay, thank you, Helen. Okay, Stefan, thank you very much. You're always the last person. Also, I would like to ask about challenging question is transnationalism is a wonderful ideal and idea, but there are many challenges, barriers. For example, we want Korea side that promotes Korean artists. And also we try to build up new way of international connection, PAMS. So we try to go into the Seoul performing art platform rather than performing art market in Seoul. So next year we will slightly different way things. So I have two questions. So international, transnational way of working, and what are challenges? How actually overcome those challenges and difficulties? That's my first question. I learned really difficult is tiring online platform because this is the second year. So this online platform can be very different from the offline and a face-to-face. How we actually encourage online platform? What's characteristic? That's sort of my second question.
Thank you. Thank you. Regarding the first question, of course, there are a lot of challenges to work transnationally because the legitimacy of all national cultural institutions is towards supporting the local or national scene and then prioritizing the funding in that direction. But on the one hand, it is very true that there is no export without import, and that anyway, the practitioners have been engaged in transnational work from as long as I can remember. And it's very important now that we work also with the resources of communities in richer countries towards creating an exchange with practitioners living in less fortunate regions in terms of art funding. This is quite something to keep in mind and not that difficult to explain. More importantly, the pandemic has been traumatic to the whole planet. It was not stopped by borders, and it was not only traumatic to our profession, but it was traumatic to everybody in all layers of society. Of course, we cannot influence that much how the laws are made and how we can determine this. We can, however, influence how we work, how we redefine our practice, and lead by example. I recently came up with the notion of thaumaturgy. So in a way, how can we together write, define, and edit the conditions of our profession and try to sustain post-traumatic growth rather than post-traumatic stress only? And to reply to the other question, yeah, this is the big, the most difficult thing. We've been so much engaged on screen outside of the meetings before. And I mean, I'm a proud visitor of those platforms. I mean, I know it's a privilege to come to PAMS in person and meet everybody and, you know, for a few days leave the computer on the desk. But it's very privileged and it's very exclusive as such. And if we are looking at the planet as a whole, as we should do, and it's not only for COVID, this is also a climate change problem. It's mostly the pollution of the consumption of the first world that is attacking first the global south. So we have this responsibility to push tools that are more accessible and have a lesser impact. That said, yes, if you spend 8 hours a day in front of a computer and then you have to do a meeting, it can be repetitive. So I guess it has to be about the content and the quality of the content, the quality of the engagement of the different people taking part in it. And this cannot happen without the direct input of those people. I don't think that a platform that comes from the top down and is imposed on everyone will work. It has actually no chance of working. It has to grow. It's a grassroots thing. And I think if it comes from the artists and from the presenters more than actually from the institutions, it has a chance. And then which are the formats? We walk a bit in the dark. We've been walking in the dark for 18 months and the planet has not stopped rotating. So let's keep walking in the dark and trying to find the light switch maybe together.
Thank you. I think we need to find a time to have a workshop together later. I would like to, before we close our opening forum, pick up some questions from the audience by YouTube and Facebook. For Jason, can you please elaborate the concept of deeper mobility? What does that mean?
Okay. So there is green mobility and there is deep mobility. It is a little difficult to define them clearly. Last year, I talked to artists in other countries, and the topic was deep mobility and deeper mobility as well. When we move around, there's one-off tour, but it goes beyond that. We can have longer-term perspective. For instance, there is an artist in other countries. When he or she comes to Korea, it doesn't end with a single presentation. We can have a shared theme. Then, artists can go to communities in Korea. This way, artwork can persist longer. It can sustain longer. So I'm in residency program. This program as of now includes Korean artists only, but next year it might change. We might think of how to have a connection with artists in other countries. I've been in this residency for 6 months, and there have been meetings online and offline. When we have artists in other countries, we can have meeting online, and for like 3 months, we can engage in discussion under the same topic. We can have context, we can have communities when artists meet together. This involves physical mobility and duration of stay. If we can have longer duration of stay, it can indicate deep mobility, I think. Also, I think it is also about having shared theme and expanding upon that theme.
Thank you very much. Because we are expected to have PAMS showcase at 7 p.m. Korean Standard Time, which means in a few minutes. So there are many other questions to Chris, Stefan, and Hewan, but we collect these questions and we will share with you. Thank you very much for the audience being with us. I apologize we cannot answer your questions. Today, with wonderful 4 panels, we talked about new and different ways of international touring, mobility, and circulation in a post-pandemic world. The limited physical mobility or our borders are closed, caused by the pandemic, are not the reason why we are questioning today's topic, next to mobility, circulation, concept, digital, green mobility, and circulation. Yes, traditional format of international touring and co-production circulation can be still valid after pandemic is over. But however, it is important for us to look into and find our ways around questions such as how do international touring, mobility, and circulation look like when it is based on artistic diversity, inclusivity, equality, ever-changing contemporaneous artistic value. What artistic response to climate change can artists, producer, festival, and theaters put into practice? What are contemporaneous idea of international mobility and circulation? For those of us living in the time where technology is deeply embedded in our day-to-day lives. So artists' endless imagination can turn crisis into opportunity. I believe that we artists, producer, festival director, policymaker, and international platform developer should work together to explore and find new ways and different ways, sharing knowledge, experience each other. Thank you very much for our four distinguished speakers. Over there, Chris and Stefan, and my colleague next to me and Hewan and Jason, for your wonderful experience, sharing ideas, and food for to think. Thank you very much. In a minute, PAMS Choice 2021 Day 1 Interdisciplinary Arts and Street Art Showcase will be with you. Please keep joining us, discover Korean contemporary artists' brilliant idea and works. Thank you very much for joining us again. Welcome to the opening of 2021 Performing Art Market in Seoul. Thank you. 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much again.
Thank you, everyone.